Basically, my angle is to make content about how you can make money or how to use these machines or do some basic tutorials on getting started because they're wanting to do the same thing that I want to do, which was to get out of the rat race and
Yeah.
have more control of your time.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jonathan, maker, inventor, designer, and Autodesker. Welcome to Shop Talk, the podcast series where we catch up with makers, inventors, designers, and engineers from shop to shop. Today, we spoke with Kyle Spicer of Spicer Designs. Kyle's living the dream. He's got a homestead, he's got an amazing shop. He's basically just learning how to do cool stuff with software and machines and getting paid to do it. So stick with us. All right, Kyle Spicer, thanks for coming, man.
Thanks for having me.
So, for those that don't know you, could you quickly tell us about your channel, what it is you do?
Yeah, so the channel is Spicer Designs, and I started this channel about, I would say, almost 3 years ago. And now I'm doing it, I would say, mostly full time, but I have a wide variety of content on the channel between metalwork, fabrication, CNC work. I do a lot of stuff with Fusion and the CAD. I do a lot of property projects,
Yeah.
stuff on all kinds of equipment, excavate. I mean, there's just a big variety. It's pretty much anything that I'm doing at any certain time.
Could you just tell us a little bit about, where you're from, how you got into this stuff, where you are now, general geographic location?
I was born and raised in Northwest Indiana,
Okay.
and about an hour and a half away from Chicago, about a half an hour south of Lake Michigan, right there at the tip. And grew up there my whole life. My whole family is all iron workers, so basically raised by iron workers. Wanted to be an iron worker, and my dad told me, if you want to get in the trades, don't be an iron worker, be an electrician, because he had been on job sites. He sees all the trades. He said the electricians have a good gig. You could do side jobs. It's a great trade to learn. And so that's exactly what I did. I got in when I was 19, and I would say I excelled pretty quick in the trade. I've always been a visual learner and hands-on, and I would like to think that I have a pretty good mechanical aptitude. So it was a good fit. And I did that for almost 20 years. Actually, 2025 will be 20 years. I'm still in the union, but I'm just not working out of it anymore. Basically, the area that we were living in, it was getting super congested. After COVID, everyone from Chicago was just hightailing it out of there. They wanted to get over state line into Indiana, where cost of living is like significantly cheaper. And I don't blame them one bit, but the area that we lived in was so close that the house prices started going up. The subdivisions were going up everywhere, and it was becoming a little too congested for where we wanted to raise our family. So we made the decision to sell everything. I quit my job and we moved down to southern Indiana, and we're about an hour north of the Kentucky border. So we're down here quite a ways. The weather is a little better down here, so
Yeah.
that's kind of nice. But the reason we ended up finding this place was because my wife had a career in basketball and she went to college down here and she played D2. She got inducted into the Hall of Fame. So we came down for that ceremony, and it was like 30 degrees warmer down here. And I'm like, when we get home, I'm looking for a place down here. And sure enough, I found this property, which was, the way I explain it to people is like you picture like your dream property in your head. And it's like, this is what I'm kind of looking for. And you kind of think of all the details. And I looked it up on Zillow, and this place literally was the image in my head. And I'm like, we got to go look at this place. And within a month and a half, we were living here after that. It happened really fast. It was kind of crazy. And we are so happy down here. It's the best decision I ever made. The channel has excelled really quickly since we've been down here. The business opportunities have opened up quite a bit down here. So it's been a great 3 years, just this whole thing. And there's definitely a lot to come. It's a lot more exciting than getting up at 5 in the morning every day and going and working out in the cold doing electrical work. So
This is a kind of a great example of you're a great success story as a person who followed the advice that I tend to give young people nowadays, which
yeah,
is if you're if you're a hands-on kind of person, you're competent, like good spatial and mechanical reasoning, stuff like that. You're sharp, you're a quick study, you're a hard worker. Um, Maybe don't go to college right away. A great way to go is find a trade that is in high demand that you're going to make money from and you're going to learn a lot from. From that, you're going to learn all kinds of really important skills for whatever it is you end up doing, even if you're not always going to be an electrician or plumber or whatever it is. And then, if you're interested in branching out, or maybe you want to grow or whatever, uh, do some, night classes, do some like online stuff, business classes, that kind of thing. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily need a 4-year degree. If you're going to be an engineer, an architect, like there's a lot of jobs that's just like the obvious thing to do is go get a college degree for sure. But
Yeah.
that you're a great example of I mean, look where you are, right? Like if you'd borrowed 100K to get an engineering degree or something, and this is what you really wanted, you probably wouldn't be in this shop you're in right now, right? Like you'd be out in that
Wow.
suburb you were still in, paying
Yeah.
down the mortgage and doing a day job, which is not what everybody wants. So kudos to you, man. Like you figured it out.
Yeah, thank you. I think, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. My advice would be to stay open-minded and be paying attention to what's going on around you because there's opportunities everywhere.
Yep.
And what happens is, at least for me, is you kind of plateau or you see a point in your career where you're going to plateau and it's kind of going to become stagnant. And that's exactly what happened to me. I had worked my way out of the field and into the office. I was overseeing our service division, and I'm sitting there in the chair and I'm just thinking like, I still have at least 20 years left in this career. And I could literally picture every single day and what it's going to be like. And I either have to accept that right now or make a decision, take a risk and go on a different path. And that's when we decided to sell our place and quit and move down here. And I have no plans of going back there to the electrical. I mean, I still do some electrical work here and there, kind of on the side,
Yeah.
but definitely not a skill that I want to just let go.
What's the business you're running? What's your bread and butter?
Basically, YouTube now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's I what I tell people is that watch the channel, and I'll even say it in the video sometimes. The the work that I do in the shop here on the plasma table and the laser engravers, I personally make more money making content about this stuff than I do actually running a business. If I were running a business, it would be very difficult for me to do by myself
Yeah.
at a certain scale that I would need to be at. And it would be hard to make content at the same time that is interesting that I could, because I'd be doing the same things day in, day out, and making content on it would run out pretty quick. So basically, my angle is to make content about how you can make money or how to use these machines or do like, some basic tutorials on getting started. And I say it all the time, I'm no expert at any of these machines. I still have a ton to learn. So I'm kind of giving more of a beginner's view to this stuff, the entry level views, which is what a lot of people are looking for because they're wanting to do the same thing that I want to do, which was to get out of the rat race and
Yeah.
have more control of your time.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Because I mean, I don't know. I got the impression watching your videos that it looks like you take commissions, right? Like you've got you
Yeah.
do signs but yeah, now that I think about it, like most of your videos are about here's how to get into this stuff. And what I like
Yeah.
about them is the work you do tends to be um this is enough information to get you going actually making something, right?
Right.
So it's, if you watch through your videos, take your advice, you're going to come out the other side being able to like get something done. It's not going to be the perfect, like, professional level thing, but you will have something to show for your work and you will have learned along the way. Right. So I like that. Yeah, that's interesting. So that's kind of your brand is like get you started in all of this really, kind of crazy high end complicated stuff.
Yeah. I mean, if I was getting started, I would much rather watch a channel where they're working right out of their own shop or their garage or their pole barn. And it's more of a beginner's view. If I were to watch a video where someone had a full-on fab shop with all these crazy CNC machines in the background and they're getting to all the intricacies of the programming, that would I would be gone within 10 seconds. It's too intimidating for a lot of people where I try to definitely bring a beginner's view to it. And it's just a lot more enticing for someone that's curious, you know.
I want to say the first video I saw from you was with a plasma cutter. Is that how you got started in CNC? Like, what did you do first when you were getting into CNC?
Well, I'll kind of just start from the beginning on that without getting, too far into detail. But, having growing up, my dad was always doing fabricating projects, so I was always very interested in it. And then in the trade, I did a lot of fabricating in the trade. Even as an electrician, you do a lot of welding. You build all your own brackets.
Sure.
There's all kinds of different things that you do. So, but we do stick welding. So I got certified in stick welding through the local, and I used to do anytime there was a fabricating job, it was me doing it, and I always enjoyed it because for one, I'm showing up on the job as an electrician, but I get to do like another trade. It was like a little bit of a vacation from the everyday electrical
Yeah.
work.
Now, stick welding, is that with a rod and a torch?
No, it's a stinger and an electrode.
Oh,
And
so
so
TIG welding then, right? Is TIG stick welding?
no,
Okay.
stick welding it's got an electrode with the flux already
Oh,
on
okay.
it. Actually, I could show you one, but there's a stinger. It's just like it almost looks like a ground clamp, and you put the electrode in it, and then you just strike an arc, and then it burns down as you're welding
Oh,
into like a nub. Yeah, it's it's widely used in the trades because you don't need shielding gas.
uh-huh.
So most time you're out in the elements, you can be welding in the rain or the wind. It doesn't matter because that flux is all built into the electrode. So
So all you need is current, basically.
yes, yeah, yeah,
Okay. I've taken classes on MIG and TIG, and like MIG I can kind of do, and then TIG is just like I'm like, you might as well give me a violin. Like I have no idea what I'm doing here. It's like it's just a crazy mess that doesn't go together. But
yeah,
that sounds like it's maybe a little bit more accessible than either of those, especially if it doesn't involve gas.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I threw you off track though. You were saying
No, it's okay.
you were doing stick welding was something you like to do because it was a little bit of a diversion from what you were normally doing with electrician work.
Yeah, just any kind of fabricating. And basically, I got to that point in my career where I've always wanted to like keep growing, and I felt like I was kind of plateauing, peaking in the electrical trade there. So I was always looking for other opportunities. I wanted to flip houses. I wanted to get old equipment and rebuild it and sell it, just anything to make some extra money or just keep growing or developing new skills. And anytime I was doing fabricating, I had to cut a piece of sheet metal or a piece of plate. You're doing it by hand, and I'm trying to do like more intricate fabricating jobs. And I'm finding myself spend so much time cutting these pieces out. And I'm like, man, there's got to be a better way. I had no idea that these CNC plasma tables existed. So I started doing some research and I found these Langmuir tables, and they were pretty cost effective. I mean, they were only like 5 grand shipped to your house. I mean, for
Wow.
everything.
Yeah.
So I already had a laptop. I ordered it, and I'm like, this is going to be it. This is going to be like my little side business. I'm going to start selling like signs to the schools, and I made a logo for our local union. So I was selling those to the union guys with their names on them, and the union guys eat that stuff up. I mean, they'll buy anything with their union number on it or something. And I was making pretty good money on the side just selling these signs and everything. And I ended up finding well, let me rephrase this. I had just built this house on 10 acres, and I wanted to get a bigger tractor. This kind of deviates a little bit here, but I didn't really watch YouTube much. So I started watching YouTube, and I found this channel, Hometown Acres. And I was looking for a review on a tractor, this Coyote tractor that I ended up buying. And I was watching this channel, and I'm like, man, like that would be something cool to do. Like I feel like I could do what he's doing. So then I started making a couple of videos on like tractors, and that's what the whole channel was going to be about. So I made like 3 or 4 videos on my tractor, and then I was making all these signs on the side still, and I'm like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to make a video on this plasma table and see how it does.
Yeah.
And it didn't do anything. I mean, I was a new channel, so none of my videos were performing well at
Sure.
all. But it didn't do much at all. And then all of a sudden that video started climbing. It started getting into the algorithm or whatever it does, and it started climbing. And I started making more videos on it. And it by no means like took over the channel. I was still doing other projects as well. But that's kind of how I got started with the YouTube and the CNC plasma table. And it just kind of opened up a lot more opportunities from there.
How did you get into Fusion from that? I'm guessing the plasma cutter was like the segue into using Fusion.
What happened with Fusion was when I was working as an electrician, I actually was doing work at a wood molding shop in a town called Griffith, Indiana. It was right next to an airport over there. And there's this guy, Mike Myers. He's like part owner of this wood molding shop. And every time I would go there, he's got all these crazy molding machines. And anytime he had an issue with one of these machines, it was more of a manufacturer issue, but he knew that I liked doing control work, and so did he. So he'd be digging into these and I'd be digging into it with him. And then we kind of became buddies, and he showed me some of his other machines. He had a laser engraver and he had a 3D printer, I think. He started showing me that stuff, and I was really intrigued by it. This was even before I got the plasma table. I guess he really was the one that introduced me to it. So then he started showing me the program, the software, which was Fusion 360. And you guys just call it Fusion now, right?
Yeah,
No more 360. Okay.
that's right.
So he shows me Fusion, and I'm like, wow, that looks complicated. And he has all these like animated models that he's built, like really intricate stuff. Parts are moving. And I was just amazed at the software, and I was amazed at his ability to be able to build these things on that software. So that was really cool. And then from that point is when I found the plasma table. And Fusion, before I bought the plasma table, I wanted to just learn how to use the software, which I would recommend to anybody. That I would say is the smart route to go. Learn the software, then buy the table. And the first person I found was Lars Christensen, which
Yeah,
I know you know. And
you
I've
and
never,
everybody else.
yeah, yeah.
He's like the entry to Fusion for almost everybody I've ever talked to.
Yeah, I mean, when you look up Fusion, he's the first one you see. And actually, Mike referred me to look for him as well, too. So even he knew of him. And he had a conduit body, which was a part that I worked with all the time. It was an LB, and it was a 3D model. And I went through that video step by step. I had him on half of my computer and Fusion on the other. And I would just do every step, and I learned all the tools. And then I tried to make some other things on my own. And I was using a 3D printer at that time. So I was actually starting off on the 3D printer. And from there, then I got the plasma table and started doing it. And actually, the plasma table is easier because everything's two-dimensional. You don't have to
Yeah.
worry about making these bodies and doing all the cuts and all the other crazy stuff. But I did learn very little. I learned enough to get by of the 3D stuff. So it made it a lot easier doing the two-dimensional. I actually just did a project. Let me grab it real quick.
Yeah.
So I told you I just installed Starlink, and I had the Starlink bracket has this really, it's kind of like a cast mold. And then there's just two bolts that are set screws that you tighten into the stanchion. And I just thought that this thing being 30 foot in the air, the Starlink is like a flat plastic,
Mhm.
rectangle. And if the wind catches that thing, those things tend to kind of loosen up and work their way off. So I was going to add this to it and actually have it welded on there.
Uh-huh.
And then I decided that it was going to be just too much work because the angle that you need to be able to turn the Starlink. And with this, I
Uh-huh.
wouldn't have been able to. So I ended up just abandoning it. But this piece right here, you can see I have a couple of breaks in it. And I did this without using the sheet metal section. And I want to learn the sheet metal part because I could have made this, and I'm trying to figure how much take up I have on these bends and all that,
Yeah.
like just physically measuring, where I'm sure that sheet metal program probably calculates a lot of that for you.
Yep. It does all that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really want to spend some time on that because I've been doing a lot more stuff like this since I've gotten that little hand brake over there.
Uh-huh.
But again, I just kind of introduced that to the shop. I don't use it a ton, but
Yeah.
it's going to allow me to do a lot more different projects that I couldn't before. So that'll be my next thing on Fusion is learning that sheet metal for sure.
Yeah. It's cool. I mean, the bend rules are, I mean, just like everything else, the default settings are usually all you really need, right? You give
Yeah.
it the gauge of mild steel or whatever. It's got all the basic stuff in there. You'd get pretty much at any metal supplier. Um, it's not hard to do either. I mean, you basically just like you make a sketch and then you sort of extrude flanges from the boundaries of the sketch, if that makes sense. So you'd
Okay.
have your flat piece right there.
Yeah.
You would say, okay, I'm gonna pull these flanges out and you give it an angle. Then there's a bunch of other tools within it that help you like, make seams meet or, you can adjust all the parameters you need to, of course, for like, so that you can get the kerf in there and you've actually got like a gap on your corners so you don't run into, stuff binding when you're trying to, break it and put it together. But yeah, anyway, I'd recommend trying it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I want to mess around with that for sure because the brake is going to be definitely something I'll be using more of. And I don't want to keep doing
Yeah.
it. I mean, I don't know if you could see it. There's like I'll even put like a little center circle
Hmm.
on some of those points just so it breaks easier. And
Yep.
I'm sure it probably does all that stuff for you or
Definitely. Yeah, and there's also you can choose different parameters for where the corners are, right? So like,
yeah.
you can and it's cool because you can do a few things and test it out and see like what results do I get with any one of these things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean it's man, I would imagine with the stuff you're doing, like you've got a whole homestead going on and equipment and you need to customize things and everything like that. Like sheet metal is probably that's gonna be a very useful tool.
Yeah. I agree. I need to spend some time on it because I think if once I learn it, I'll probably be using it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Is
and then
it
you'll upgrade your handbrake. It'll be hydraulic before you know it. And you've certainly got the room for it. Good Lord. How much space do you have in that shop?
it's really not that big. It probably looks bigger on camera. It's 36 by 40.
Yeah, that's
It's not a very yeah, it's not real. I got some junk in the corner. Those are some other projects. And then I've got the Evolution cold steel saw over there. That thing is really nice.
nice.
Got some X Tool laser engravers that they sent me over there.
Uh-huh.
A Monport CO2 laser
CO2.
they
Yeah.
sent. And then I got a welding cart that I'm working on right there. That should actually be a pretty cool video. It's going to be like the ultimate welding cart. Everything's going to be all built into it. And then the plasma table. And then behind it, you can see is that pan brake from Keika.
Uh-huh.
If you want to see any of it, I can walk the laptop over there.
Yeah, I might do that in a minute. The
Yeah.
cold saw, does that have coolant or is it just
No, it looks like a wood saw blade,
oh
but
yeah,
it'll just cut cold steel and
it just has a
it
lot of teeth.
yeah, it throws a lot of like chips, like metal chips, which people complain about, but I don't mind it because it's either metal chips or it's going to be metal dust. I'd rather have the chips.
Yeah, for sure. You could have gone with I mean there's any number of 2D design apps you could have chosen over Fusion. It sounds like now I wonder if starting with Fusion maybe is why you still use it. It could be part of it, but what are some of the advantages of it being 3D even if you're doing more 2D stuff?
Having the option to do 3D stuff, you're saying?
Well, like why is Fusion why use that instead of an app that is like specifically 2D that
I
maybe
got you.
you
Yeah.
could you could also make you could also make G code from.
Well, for one, yeah, you're right. I was introduced to it, so I started off learning it. So that is a big part why I continue to use it. But I'm glad that it worked out that way because if I want to expand my machines and my skills, I can do all of that stuff in one program. I mean, I could do everything in that program that I'll ever need to do and beyond.
Hmm.
So I definitely like that about Fusion. I do still, and I use the 3D. I still make 3D models, whether I'm cutting something or maybe I just want to design something and I just want to have a 3D model with measurements. Sometimes I'll just create it on there and I'll go back and just reference all the measurements. I could just
Yeah.
click on the lines and I can see all the measurements. So it makes
Yeah.
it easier to do projects sometimes. Because there's a lot of times where if you just start a project without any kind of a plan or a drawing, you're always going to run into one little thing that you missed.
Yeah.
Where if you take the time and you design it on the CAD software, you can you can find all those mistakes ahead of time even though you spend a little more time on the front end, it'll save you on the back end and you'd get a better finished product too. So yeah, I really like Fusion. I've never experimented with any other software. I've had many people comment about software that they prefer to use. And I mean, it's just like anything, it's good to have options.
Sure.
And people have things that they like and they don't like about Fusion, and same with the other software. So I haven't had any issues with it. Anytime I have trouble, I try to work through the issue on my own instead of like calling someone. And I always suggest that to people that watch the channel. When you're learning how to use any of these machines, if I get hundreds of emails from people that have issues with their plasma table or their laser engraver, as soon as they run into a problem, they just call someone or they want someone else to resolve it for them. And I'm like, you're never going to figure out that machine if you rely on someone else to fix the problem all the time. Like you got to dig into it at some point because it's gonna make you so familiar with that machine that anytime you have a little issue, you're gonna know exactly what it is.
Yep.
And that's what I've always done, and I feel like that has worked pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, something else I find with, I mean, I know a lot of people that do, even fairly complex 3D things, but they're just used to some 2D software and then just kind of make it work with that, which of course you can do, right? You can even make 3D things that way. I mean, that's the way people always did it before we had 3D software. But um, I find even just being able to see the actual thickness of the thing. So you're just doing something 2D, right? Especially if there's layers involved, but even if it's just just like one flat thing, you can spin the thing around and see like, does this thickness make sense? Does this thing look dinky because it's too thin? Like
Yeah,
you can actually get a preview. And then also, especially if there's clients involved, like anytime you can offer a rendering,
I do
that's
that all
just
the
a
time.
next step on top of, like let's make sure this is actually what you want before we go and start cutting stuff and wasting material.
Yep, I do that all the time. So yeah, I use the 3D feature on every single design that I do because, and I found it helpful in multiple ways. For one, what you said with the layered signs, when I create layered signs, I'll create the sketch on multiple layers, and then I'll turn each one of those sketches into a body. So I can see all the stacked
Mm.
layers all with the actual thickness to them. And then what I'll do is I'll create reference holes. And the easiest way that I found to do it, I'm sure there's a better way, but this is just the way that I figured out that works for me. I'll make a sketch. I'll create a new sketch on that body, on the face of it, on the upper layer. I'll make a circle the size reference hole that I need for my standoffs, and then I'll cut that circle. I'll cut it all the way through every layer. That way everything is perfectly aligned.
Mhm.
And then I'll just take each layer to the manufacturing tab and I'll leave it in a body form. And then when I am going through all my cut parameters, I will click on the body for my geometry, so it'll automatically calculate all of my cut lines, and it cuts on the right side of the line
Yeah.
when it's in the body form. So instead of clicking every single line
Right.
and making sure that you're on the right side of it,
Yep.
if you just make it a body and click that body, and I tell people that in the videos all the time, it is so easy to do it that way.
Yeah.
That's typically how I do a design that I'm cutting on the plasma table, and especially if it's multiple layers with reference holes, that's what I found that works best for me.
Mhm.
And again, with the renderings, when a customer wants a logo or something made, or me to make a metal sign for them, I'll do that exact thing. I usually will do the drawing and then I'll extrude it like a tenth of an inch, and I'll kind of put it on like a little bit of an angle so you can kind of catch like that glare on it.
Yeah.
And I'll just do a screenshot or capture the image and send it to them, and they can get, as close of a view of what it's going to look like as possible with that rendering. One thing I'm struggling with on Fusion right now is sometimes what I'll do is I'll create a sketch and I won't really worry about the size of the sketch at the moment. I'll just go back and scale it later. And when I scale that sketch, it'll disform parts of it. It'll
Yeah.
just and usually it's on where I use the spline tool, it'll distort that part of it. But then if I turn it into a body and I scale it, it'll scale it perfectly. But the issue that I'm having is when I create a sketch for a logo or something, I don't really worry about the dimensions of it at the moment. I just kind of get it built. A lot of times I'll import a canvas in there and I'll kind of use the canvas to roughly make that sketch or use parts of that canvas for it. That's
Sure.
how I made the Spicer Designs logo and my machine logo and all that. But when I scale the sketch, it'll distort it, usually where I use the spline tool. And then if I turn it into a body, it'll scale it no problem. But when I send these files to the fab shop to cut, I send them a DXF file. And so I need to be able to scale the sketch so I could send them that DXF file. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So the workflow for that I always recommend that is foolproof is first of all, you don't want to scale sketches because sketches are often not fully constrained, especially if you're making them the way you're talking about, right? So you're using splines and you're sketching out from a canvas, you're basically eyeballing it, and which
Yeah.
is fine. I mean, especially if you're talking about like organic shapes, that's the way you would do it.
Yeah.
But what's happening there is all of the anchor points and handles and all that stuff on each part of that sketch are
Yeah.
unconstrained. So when you scale the sketch, it doesn't bring everything, it doesn't scale everything uniformly, I guess is the best way to put it, because
I know what
each
you
one of
mean.
those points has its own coordinates. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not explaining this very well. I probably don't even really understand exactly what's happening with it, but what I do know is if you take that sketch and you make a surface out of it, right? So your body is just a surface with no thickness. So you don't have
Yeah.
to extrude anything. You just do a surface, right? And then that becomes your base geometry for whatever you want to scale. What you can do is you take that and let's say like you just want to try it out at whatever scale it's at right there. You extrude it by, eighth of an inch. If you later go back in the timeline and then you go back past, before the extrude, and then you scale it to whatever you want, and then back, and then forward again past the extrude, now it's going to be an eighth of an inch, but the whole thing's going to be, whatever you scaled it to, right?
Okay.
So you do that, and that lets you control the keep the thickness rational, right? So you're not scaling. If you scale an eighth inch thick body, you scale that twice as big. Now it's a quarter inch thick, and you don't want that, right? So
Right.
you use the timeline to get that sorted, and then you have your real thickness at the end. Once you've decided that this is good, right? This is the geometry I want to use, you create a new sketch from the face of the thing you made. Okay. And that's what you export. So it's like the last thing in the timeline is I'm making a new sketch that is it's projected basically from that face. As you know, if you create a sketch on a face, it just already projects the geometry. Then that's the DXF you export. So your
Okay.
first sketch, and this goes for SVGs too, or anything you're inserting or whatever, that is you don't touch it. You just make a surface out of it and then you work from that. And then at the end, whatever the face is of the thing you need, you make that DXF and send it off. And it's foolproof.
Okay. So I didn't know you could do that. So you could take the face of a body,
Yeah.
create a new sketch on that face. And as
Hmm.
soon as you create that new sketch, it already takes all of those vectors for that outside. And I did not
Exactly.
know that. Okay. I'm gonna
Now,
try.
now, if you've got little islands in there or whatever, you may need to go in and project the faces of other things, right?
Yeah.
But like any surface you start from, any flat surface, that's going to automatically be projected lines from that object.
I gotcha.
So then again, you can go
Uh,
back and make changes. You could even go back and make changes to the original sketch, right? But
yeah.
as long as it's the same lines there, when you go back to the finish, to the end of your timeline, it's all there, right? And depending on the kinds of changes you make, you won't even need to do a new projected sketch. You can just use the one you've already made, if that makes sense.
So one thing that I did that I found worked for me was I took the original sketch and I exported it as a DXF
Uh-huh.
and I inserted that DXF
Yeah.
and then I was able to scale it.
The reason that works is when you export a DXF, it becomes a mesh basically. Like that's DXF is a kind of mesh file. So what you're getting there is actually tiny vertices and lines, right?
Yeah.
It's basically tessellated, right? It's so
Yeah.
when that comes in, Yeah, sure. You can scale that all day long because it doesn't have splines, right? It doesn't have, there's no control points. There's no other constraints at all. It's just like, here's the thing and you can export it. But
Yeah.
I would recommend doing it the way I explained because it gives you a lot more control. Like if you're exporting a DXF and bringing it back in, you've kind of lost your timeline there, right?
Yeah.
So if
Right.
you want to go back and make a change somewhere, if you want to make a slight difference in the scale, um, it gives you a lot more like wiggle room to make changes, I guess I should say.
Yeah. That
Um,
makes sense.
but yeah, I can explain it. I mean, I don't, it might be worth making a quick video of that workflow. There's no way you're the only person that is having that same issue. I mean, I know I was. That's probably why I do it that
Yeah.
way.
That's helpful information for sure. I'm going to try that instead
Yeah.
because I agree. Like having that timeline and the ability to still work with those constraints, I
Yeah.
would much rather have that option.
Yeah, that's my workflow for laser cutting, for example, right? Because I don't actually have the way my laser cutter's set up. I have to bring in DXFs into this dumb control program. I can't actually, I won't belabor you with the details, but basically I'm not able to take cutting geometry out of Fusion and bring it in. I have to use this weird proprietary software to create the G code because
Yeah.
it's some weird like language I can't connect, because it's this obscure, generic Chinese laser cutter.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, that's how I do that. So even if I've got a complex project, even if it's if it's 3D, if there's a bunch of faces that are sticking together and tabbing in and making boxes and stuff like that, that's still how I do it. I have my finished product, and then I just make face one, face two, whatever. I name those sketches at the very end of the timeline and bring them in, and that way I know that I'm first of all, I know that it's finalized. I don't have to wonder which sketch is which. Like, is this the one I should be sending to it or not? Like, that way it's just like I can look at this thing with those things turned on. The faces all have that like blue hue to them. Great. Like, good to go. Send it off. Um, so yeah, works for me. I can run you through a quick tutorial sometime if you want more details on that.
No, I mean, it makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'll bet there's a lot of things that I do on Fusion that is not like the right way to do it, but
Yeah.
I've just figured out a roundabout way to
Yeah.
do what I need to do to do the job,
Oh
basically.
man, you and everybody else, dude. Like
Yeah.
there's definitely an ideal way to do pretty much anything, I'm sure but hey man, if it works, it works.
And again, I'm no expert. I have a lot to learn, but I'm
Sure.
trying to do it the right way from the beginning. And I used to tell apprentices this all the time. It doesn't matter what the application is. It's always got to be the quality first. The speed will come later. You'll get faster at it. Like a lot of these apprentices, I'm teaching them how to bend conduit,
Yeah.
and they were trying to go as fast as they could and they would put it up and it would look like crap. It wouldn't be
Yeah.
level. They didn't have the right kicks or the offsets. And I tell them, pull it out, trash it, and start over again. And then it's like you were trying to go fast, and look what ended up happening. Now you're doing
Yeah.
it again. So did that really work out for you? Like take the time, do it right. Like I don't care if it takes you the whole day to put in a couple of sticks of conduit. As long as I come in here and they're perfect and we don't have to redo them, like you'll get faster as time goes on. And it's the same with
Yeah.
using CAD and all the different CAD tools. Like it, I'm way faster than I used to be, but I know there's people out there that would just obliterate me. They can run circles around me, and I'm totally okay with that.
I love that. That's great advice. Start with quality, get that right. The speed will come later. That's great
Yep.
advice, man. I've never heard anybody put it that way. That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming, Kyle. It's been a great conversation. I hope to
Yeah,
do it again. I'm really looking forward to whatever's next on your channel. No matter what it is, I'm sure it's going to be something I'm interested in.
I appreciate
Could
you
you?
having me. It's fun talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Could you tell the audience where to find you?
Yeah, we're on Instagram, which mostly my wife does all the Instagram stuff, and that's just look up Spicer Designs, and then YouTube is our main platform. You just look up Spicer Designs, and we're there.
All right. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank
We'll see
you.
you soon. Hey, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion for yourself, find the link in our description.